they should ask an attorney if they've tried cases to a jury trial, because there's a lot of attorneys that take work in, they don't do the work, and they've never been in the courtroom, and I don't think they get the best advice in those situations.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post. Here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys that are at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm joined with Pat Neustrom of the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Neustrom and Associates, out in Salina, Kansas. Pat, how are you doing today?
Great, Justin. Thanks for the chance to talk to people.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump over first and take a look at Pat's website. This is Neustrom and Associates. That's just Neustrom, his last name.com. As always, there will be a link in the description down below. If you're anywhere in the Midwest, you're in the Kansas area, and you've been injured, he's in Salina, but obviously Kansas is a really big place. It's my home state as well, so it's exciting to get to talk to someone from Kansas. You can visit him at neustrom.com. You can also give him a phone call at 785-825-1505. That's got kind of a nice rhythm to it. Lots of fives in there. So I like that. Before we get started, I'm going to jump over and take a look. We do have three sponsors for the show. We'll read our first two sponsors today. And our first sponsor is Groove Funnels. If you love spending $5,000 to $10,000 building a new website, and you love $200 to $300 a month hosting for a platform that allows you to sell products to your potential customers and clients, then by all means, keep doing whatever it is you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-new, all-in-one website funnel sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsaime. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for a free account and build a complete site at no cost. Really, truly at no cost. There's no cost to build. You can actually build, I believe, up to 3 functional websites at theattorneypost.com/groove. And it really is a Swiss Army knife of a website, replacing almost every single thing out there that you're using, from ClickFunnels to whatever your email management platform is. They do webinars, they do sales, they do affiliate stuff, they do everything. It's an all-in-one Swiss Army knife of a website, and I've been very, very impressed with it. I've even used it to build some of my sites out as well. Here's a list of all the different things that it replaces, and it's free. So visit theattorneypost.com/groove. Our second sponsor on the top half here is ERTC Express, which is ERC.org, nationalerc.org. You may have noticed that the world just went through a pandemic, and many businesses were forced to shut down or reduce their hours and add supply chain interruptions, and ultimately, suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress recently passed the CARES Act, which allocated over $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. This is free money for your business that can be spent in whatever way you think makes the most sense. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can calculate and see how much you could be getting back by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business that they work with receives over $200,000 to reinvest back in their business that never needs to be repaid. The calculator is free, and there's never a fee unless they secure funding for you. Visit nationalerc.org. All righty. So I am joined with Pat, and again, he runs the law firm that bears his name, Neustrom and Associates. He's an injury attorney practicing out of Salina, Kansas. He's a KU grad, Kansas University, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, home of baseball or home of basketball.
That's right.
And I grew up in Topeka, which is actually where he got his law degree from Washburn, which is a pretty well established law school here in the Midwest. And so I grew up in Topeka. I lived in Lawrence for a couple of years as well. So I feel like I've been living in Pat's backyard most of my life. He is one of the top 100 national trial attorneys. He's in the Association of Top 100 National Trial Lawyers. He's got a 10.0 rating on AVO. He's a $1 million advocate. He's been admitted to the bar since 1977 here in Kansas. He's been an injury lawyer since 1978, making this his 46th year in business as of, I believe, March of this year. It's a good year to start a business. That's when I started mine as well, though it wasn't back in 1978. He is a husband, he is a father, and he is a grandfather. So the first question I have for you, Pat, the question I always ask is, that was a mouthful to say, but what did I miss?
I think you got most of it. I've been practicing in Salina for 46 years, and pretty much been doing plaintiff's injury work the last 25. I started out doing a little bit of everything: divorces, bankruptcies, workers' compensation. But I like the injury work. I like working with kind of the underdog, suing the insurance company, making sure that they pay what they should be paying on claims.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, tell you what, give me if I was stuck in an elevator with you and we're going up, Kansas doesn't have a lot of really tall buildings, especially out there, but it's my wife actually, her grandparents or her grandma lives in Waukene, which is near you know where that is, I'm sure. We drive by Salina
Right.
all the time to get out there. So I drive in your neck of the woods all the time, which is funny. But anyway, if I was stuck with you in an elevator and I just asked you, Pat, what do you do? Why don't you go ahead and give me your 30-second elevator pitch. Tell me who specifically you like to work with, your specifically your best clients, what types of injury law you really like to focus on, et cetera.
Well, in Salina, it'd be a 10-story elevator, so it'd be a short ride. But we basically do injury work. We represent the plaintiff against the defendant, who's the person that's at fault. It's usually a trucking case, motorcycle case, auto case. We do medical malpractice occasionally and nursing home litigation. We probably have 30 to 60 cases at a time, and we've been representing the plaintiff pretty much exclusively for, I'd say, 25 to 30 years.
Okay. I've always appreciated injury attorneys. I work really well with them. I work with a lot of injury attorneys in my regular line of work doing marketing. And I've always just appreciated the fact that what you guys do is you make the justice system accessible to people that are in real need of it, obviously, if they're injured, or, dead, and then you're helping their family, get by. But you give them access in a way that they just wouldn't be able to get access to if they weren't working with an attorney. So I've always appreciated the model that you guys operate on. So let me ask you this: you've been practicing for a long time, and you've been doing injury law almost exclusively for a long time. So were you one of those kids that just knew that you wanted to do law? Did you know that you wanted to do injury law? What got you into law, and what got you into injury law?
So I actually did decide to go to law school when I was in 5th grade, which is kind of unusual. Back in the 60s or 50s, when I was growing up, people would always ask, are you going to be a doctor or a lawyer if you were a smart kid? And I didn't like blood. I thought I wanted to go to law school. My mom wanted to go to law school, but because of World War II, she didn't get to go. So she kind of was pushing in the background. I took debate classes and did well with that. I wanted to help people. Originally, I thought I was going to do criminal work, and then I did an internship here in Salina under Judge Hubler. And he basically laid out that I'd be spending my day with people who go to jail most of the time. Most of the time, they're guilty. And they said, did I really want to do that? And I said, I actually just want to help people who have a chance to turn their lives around. And so we started looking at injury work and helping people get money to pay their bills and kind of get a fresh start with whatever their injury is, and help them kind of get through the functional loss, get good doctors where we can, get that lined up for them and get them back on their feet.
Gotcha. Personal question. I saw that you have your degrees, your undergraduate degrees from KU. And if I'm not mistaken, your degrees are in history, your degrees in history. Is that correct? And if so, what's your favorite area of history?
Oh, wow. Had a double major of history and English. I was in, what was it? Poli-sci. And it seemed like in political science, they were just giving you expensive words to say the same thing that you knew. It didn't seem like we were learning something. So I got in history. What I liked about it was you were studying an era of time and then kind of evaluating what are their values and principles that come from that. And it kind of worked in with law school, and that we study people, we study their stories and try to figure out how to solve problems. And so I see more of a natural evolution. It was kind of a pre-law degree.
Gotcha. Do you have a particular area of history that you like? Like I was, so I'll tip my cards here. I actually went in, my undergraduate was originally going to be poli-sci as well. And I started doing it and I realized I didn't like it. I was, training to be like a city manager or something. And so I switched into history and philosophy as opposed to history and English. I find that English is, for a lot of people, I think English really is like philosophy in a lot of ways. I know KU had a really fascinating philosophy program back in like the 70s. It had like national attention or something, if I recall. But so do you have a particular aspect or area of history that intrigues you, or is it just history in general? Like I was a medievalist by trade.
I had a professor, Lynn Johnson, who taught medieval history, and I just really liked him and his ability to lay things out. And so I took quite a few of those courses. I probably specialized more in U.S. history just because I was going to go into law school. I wanted to know the foundation for laws and that type of thing. And
Gotcha.
went that direction.
Yeah, I did not like American history when I was younger. I don't know why. I just found it boring. Maybe it's because I assumed, well, I'm American, I don't need to know this or whatever it happened to be. But ever since I'm married, I got 5 kids, and I don't want to be dour. Sometimes I feel like the world around us is going crazy. But I found in the last, 10 years of my life, I've been just enthralled by American history, and I can't get enough of it. I kind of wish I would have been my undergraduate degree instead of medieval history, but I don't regret the medieval stuff. I think it was fascinating. But yeah, anyway, I just find that fascinating. You also have a degree in English, so I got to ask you. Here's another question that's has nothing to do with law, but what's your favorite book? What's your favorite novel?
To Kill a Mockingbird was kind of the book that I read in the beginning that was part of the decision to go to law school and
I was going to
be
say
a lawyer.
appropriate.
Yeah.
Appropriate. Did you ever see? I guess they posthumously published a sequel to that apparently kind of knocks Atticus Finch down a little bit.
I did not see that.
That it was the Harper Lee estate, and apparently she wrote it, but then she never published it. So I didn't know if you'd ever encountered that one or not. I've heard less than stellar reviews of it, but I think some of that may just be people really attached to the character of Atticus Finch, which makes sense. He's a paean of moral virtue amongst the great American pieces of literature. So
right.
Well, let's get back on the topic of law then. Atticus Finch gets us there a little bit. I read one of the sponsors, obviously we just went through a pandemic. I found being in Kansas, we're a far more laid back rural community in general. I was curious if anything was changed in your practice of law due to the pandemic or the measures that people took to compensate for the pandemic. Did it affect you? Did it affect your firm? Did it affect your clients? Did it affect your cases?
Yeah, I'd say it did. We were able to maintain our practice and keep our employees fully employed. We actually applied for some PPP money and got a little bit to help with payroll. I think the big change is everyone went to Zoom, and most of our documents that we file with the court are digitally filed. So we used to walk over to the courthouse, every other day. And I would say we've been in the courtroom 2 or 3 times in the last couple of years, which is kind of unusual. So we had a hearing in Abilene this morning. We did that by Zoom, and there was on the docket call probably 30 attorneys, all from different parts of the state that were not having to travel. So where maybe in 2019, we might have had 10,000 miles of travel. In 2020, we had more like 1,000 miles of travel.
Oh, wow.
So that's been nice. It kind of cut down the time that we are lost. I say the down part of that is when you travel, you have a chance to think uninterrupted. And sometimes when you're getting ready for deposition, it's kind of nice to have that time on the road where you can just let things come to you, let your left brain work a little bit, and not get so geared into the specific questions.
No, it makes sense. And it's not like you couldn't simulate driving there, but nobody's going to do that. So, setting aside like sit down and think time, like that's actually probably a very important thing to do, even if it's something that's just very counterintuitive to the things we want to do, which is kind of fascinating. If nothing else, I always found driving was a great excuse to, get through a couple of audiobooks or something like that. Re-listen to Kill a Mockingbird.
You can always take a walk too. That's the best thing anymore.
Yeah, it probably is actually better. Breathe deeply, get the brain, the blood circulating, and
that's what they say.
Wake the brain up. So, well, let me ask you this, Pat, and you've been practicing for a long time. You have a wealth of experience, I'm sure. I am sure that at some point in your career, you probably had a setback or a failure that maybe it drove you nuts. One of my favorite questions to ask my guests is, tell me about one of your biggest failures in your practice of law. But obviously, it's only a failure if you don't learn from it, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about one of your biggest failures, but what did you learn from it, and how do you carry that forward to make sure you're remembering the lesson and taking care of your clients or solving that issue in the future?
Back in 1984, I wanted to be certified by a National Trial Lawyer Group, and you had to have 10 jury trials within a period of time. I think it was 5 years. And I took 3 jury trials back to back. One was in court in Wichita. It was a products liability case involving a jacuzzi that injured a girl from Salina who went to school at Wichita State. Then I went to federal court in Topeka and tried a civil rights trial defending Saline County Fred Phelps was on the other side, and that was 2 weeks of my life that was kind of lost, I would say. He's a interesting guy, was a really good lawyer. And
Mhm.
so then we came back to Salina, and we had a girl who was hit on the interstate and lost her leg. And it was a danger invite rescue theory, which my friend talked me into. It really wasn't a very good theory. We lost that case. And it just the experience was you can't really get ready and do a good job on that third case when you have two in front of it. That was the big experience. I appreciated getting into court. We did win all three cases, and so I
Awesome.
felt good about that.
What percentage of the cases that people come to you about, what percentage wind up settling versus what percentage usually have to be litigated?
I would say that we probably go through 150 clients a year where we talk to people and evaluate the cases, might be 200. Out of that, we probably accept 50 to 60 and work them up. Sometimes you look at the medical records and you can't separate pre-existing conditions with what happened in a car crash. And so you have to take that into consideration on valuing the settlement. But to answer your question, across the country, 98% of cases settle. Now that we have Zoom and mediation, I would say that we get a lot of depositions done after we file the case. Both sides know the facts. Then we go to Kansas City or somewhere. I like to do those in person when I can. And they come up with a number, we come up with a number, the mediator goes back and forth and basically tells us that we have a bad case and goes in and tells them that they have a bad case and tries to get us to come to a middle number. I would say half our cases settle at mediation anymore. The surprising thing was during COVID, we were able to settle cases earlier. The courts were closed and a lot of the adjusters were at home. So you'd call them and they'd pick up with the phone in the evening. And I go, I didn't think you'd be there. And they go, well, we're just getting in extra time. They pay overtime for us. And
Oh, wow.
They were pretty laid back and easy to work with. And we did real well that year for our clients and for ourselves also.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is.
Well, let me ask you the flip side then. Obviously, you don't want to overstretch yourself, but can you tell me about a case or two that maybe are the ones you're most proud of? I'm sure you've helped a lot of people get back on their feet, or recover, or if a spouse lost their spouse, replace the income, be able to take care of their kids, etc. Or maybe I don't know if you set any precedents or anything like that. But tell my listeners about a couple of your cases that you're most proud of.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I say what I'm most proud of is that we work with clients, just the whole thing they're going through. We like to have them into the office and get to know them, find out who their doctors are and see if they're getting the kind of care that they need. We just recently talked to a girl who was in a wreck in Denver and she lost her arm and she kind of got shuffled around at the hospital and wasn't able to get occupational therapy. So I called my daughter in Kansas City who does that kind of work and got some information for her and sent her that information. And I think that's what I like, is helping people get back on their feet. And then once they're healed to the point that the doctors say that's the most we can do, then we try to value the claim and submit that to an insurance company and get them to compensate the person for what they've lost.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So
I'd say the case that kind of stands out in my mind, it's kind of an unusual case, but we had a man who was working for a meat packing plant, and it was back about 30 years ago. He got AIDS and he was going to get fired. And if he told them that he had that, everyone was afraid of it back then.
Yeah.
And his dad came in. His dad was a farmer and just said, I don't understand it, but I want you to help my son. And so we contacted the beef packing plant and told them the situation, that he shouldn't be there working with knives. And we wanted to get him off. We wanted to make sure that his COBRA insurance was converted over so that he would have coverage. And I got a call from attorneys in Detroit saying they were going to sue me for $1 million. And if they had to stop the line, then, I'd be responsible. And I hung up the phone. They called back and then said, "What do you want?" And I said, "We want health insurance coverage." And that's it. So we got that worked out. We didn't get much of a fee off of it, but I felt really good about helping this dad out with his son and the situation they had. And I like that as much as anything.
Gotcha. Well, again, that's one of the things is you're making a difference in people's lives, and I think that really matters. I know Salina's right there on a highway on 70, which is one of the big thoroughfares, running across this country. How many accidents do you know happen on that highway? Or most of your accident cases, do they tend to come from the highway, or do they tend to come from just people driving in general?
Well, we're kind of on the intersection of 135 and 70.
That's right.
There's quite a few accidents that happen as people come off the interstate and they're on the off ramp and they get stopped and someone comes behind them and hits them. We have quite a few accidents where people slide off the road during icy storms, but I would say half of our clients come from small towns in central and north central Kansas, Concordia, Beloit, Clay Center, Belleville, McPherson, those kind of towns. And I'd say half are from Salina, half are from that area. Once in a while, we'll get a referral from a lawyer who does this in Kansas City or Topeka. And so we've handled cases in St. Francis, Kansas, which is almost in Nebraska and almost in Colorado. And then we've had cases clear down nursing home clear in Coffeyville. So we're willing to travel if there's a way that we can make a difference.
Gotcha. When people come to you, do they often bring certain misconceptions about what it is you do or what it is you're able to do? What's one of the biggest misconceptions people bring into your office that you'd like to, I guess, disabuse people of?
I think people are intimidated by lawyers. They think they have to have the answers when they come in. And we're willing to sit down. And most attorneys that do this kind of law are willing to sit down and spend a half an hour to an hour just kind of understanding what went on and seeing if there's something they can do to help. Mm-hmm. Most people trust insurance companies, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing in the beginning. I think it's good to be represented and have someone give you advice before you get too involved with, like a lot of people come in, they've already given a statement to the opposite insurance company. Mm-hmm. And those guys that take the statements are very good at trying to extract information that they can use against them. And a lot of times people have a conception of what happened in a wreck, but they've hit their head. They know what they think they saw, but until we get the facts, the crash report, talk to the officer, we're not even sure what happened. And so before they commit on the record as to what happened, we want to make sure that they know the full set of facts and are able to speak with knowledge.
Okay, that makes sense. If someone's been in an accident, what's some of the best advice that they could, other than don't talk to the insurance company immediately, right? What's some of the best advice you'd give to somebody that's in an accident, and especially if they've been injured?
If they need medical care, to get that right away. Not post on social media. It's good to try to find out a lawyer that is respected in their community. There's a lot of lawyers that advertise on TV or advertise that basically take a lot of clients and deal in volume. Mm-hmm. So if they have a significant case, it's good that they get into a significant lawyer who's handled similar cases. Like trucking experience is completely different than automobile law. And they should ask an attorney if they've tried cases to a jury trial, because there's a lot of attorneys that take work in, they don't do the work, and they've never been in the courtroom. And I don't think they get the best advice in those situations.
Gotcha. Random question, but have you ever been on a jury?
I have not. And my wife this morning had to go to a jury panel, and she was there till 11 o'clock. We knew the defense lawyer, so I didn't think she was going to get called, but she had to sit there. And yesterday she's going, "I'm not sure I want to go." And I said, "Well, it's kind of your duty." And she was, "Well, I knew you'd say that." And I said, a lot of times people will get in there, they're kind of mad because their schedule's interrupted, but hopefully they'll watch a good trial and learn something and feel good about their experience. We talk to jurors afterwards, and a lot of people will say, I didn't realize it worked this way. And it's nice to know that we have these protections.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've been called to jury duty twice, and one of the times I think it happened. It's a very quick turnaround here in Hutchinson, and I think it was probably like the day that we were leaving we take about a 2 or 3 week break, and at Christmas time take our kids out to go see the family. And so I must have missed the summons. And we came back, I got a note in the mail that said I was in contempt of court. I'm like, oh, what just happened? Apparently I totally missed the court date and everything else. And so since I never showed up, I was in contempt. I don't know if, not only is it your duty, but if you don't do it, you might wind up in trouble.
That's true.
But I've never actually had the chance to serve. Both of them settled before we ever even got there. I think one of them we sat around for about an hour, and then they let us all go. So,
we do your jury, and we do mock juries, and it's kind of interesting to see how people react to cases, because sometimes we get too close to the facts and what we're trying to prove or the direction we're trying to go. And we do a jury where you actually get people online and you give them information, and they can kind of answer questions through email. And so you can put out a certain set of facts and explain, okay, the doctor is going to say this, then what do you think about that? And sometimes you can pick up a jury theme that would help you explain things in a way that resonates with jurors, that they understand. And sometimes you realize that your case isn't worth as much as you thought it was, and maybe you should get it settled in your client's interest.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had a case where they offered you a settlement and you knew the case was worth way more than the settlement, and you wound up going to court and winning?
Yeah, we've done that. I'd say what happens most of the time is we get really small offers, and then lately, I think with the insurance companies all kind of competing for low dollars, so you've got insurance companies like Geico and others that have kind of an inexpensive product. And so they're selling these $25,000 policies. It's kind of made it difficult to negotiate upfront. And I think what the insurance companies do is they put a small amount of money on the table, and a lot of people will take that and not want to hire a lawyer, or they'll get a letter from us and they'll come up with a little bit higher amount. And once you've call their dare and you file the lawsuit, you go through the depositions, then you've put your facts on the table, and they see that your client actually was like a pre-existing condition, really was aggravated, and then their life has changed. And so at that point in time, you can go to mediation and do a lot better. And usually at that point, your file's kicked up to an adjuster who has authority to pay what the case is worth. And like last month, we were talking to an adjuster, and we were trying to get 100,000 on the case. And after a couple of months of going back and forth with our office, he finally said, well, I have 300 files and I only have authority to 7,500. So we've been kind of wasting our time, and we got a supervisor involved and got the thing resolved.
Gotcha. How do you work with medical professionals to build a case? Do you work with a lot of doctors around the area? Do you have certain doctors you tend to go to? Like, what does that process look like?
We're kind of lucky in Salina. We just know most of the doctors because it's a small community. You might know them from the country club and playing golf, or you might know them from like the chamber associations, things like that. The doctors we work with normally are the orthopedic surgeons, because we have clients with broken bones, and we work with a lot of neurosurgeons and neurologists if there's brain injuries, that kind of thing. So within the state, we know most of those people. We know what their reputation is as far as, do they want to get involved in the legal part of it? Some doctors, like surgeons, do not want to get involved in it. They want to do surgeries and line those up, and that's their interest. So every once in a while, we'll have to hire a doctor to do an independent medical exam. And so we actually send them money to evaluate the case and give us a report. They do a pretty good job of summarizing the medical record, and then you can give that to the insurance company, and they kind of have the whole thing laid out, and they know we have a doctor who's going to give us an opinion on our side. But if possible, I like to work with the treating doctor, and most of the time I know them here. I can call them up and say, what do you think about this? And I want to know the good and the bad up front so we can kind of steer clear of a lot of mistakes and wasting time for our client or for ourselves.
That makes sense. Well, here in a minute, Pat, I'm enjoying the conversation, but I don't want to keep you all afternoon. So we're going to jump over and we'll do another sponsor reading and come back. But before I do that, after we've done that, I'm going to ask you two fun questions. So the questions that I think my listeners like the most. Question number one is, if you can go back in time and see young Pat, what advice would you give young Pat, other than trust me, in the mid 2000s, there's going to be this thing called Bitcoin and just trust me and buy it, but what advice would you give to yourself fresh out of law school? And then also, I'm going to give you my magic pen. This is an Inkjoy Papermate. I'm not sponsored by Papermate. I just really like their pens. They write really well. But this particular pen is magical. That's why it has 4 colors. And it can strike laws from the books. It can edit laws that are on the books, or it can add new laws to the books. And in a minute, I'm going to let you borrow my pen. And you can add, edit, or delete any law. This can be a major national sweeping, law that affects everybody. Or it can be that stupid county law that forces you to fill out form in triplicate, 8 times a week, right? So in a minute, I'll give you that pen. Before I do that, though, let's jump back over to your website. I'm actually looking at it, I believe, right now. So again, for those of you watching, this is Pat's website. This is neustrom.com, neustrom.com, link in the description below. And like most attorneys out there, most injury attorneys out there, they work on they win or no fee guarantee. So unless you're getting paid, he doesn't get paid, which means there's no cost to work with him. And you can give him a phone call, 785-825-1505, and set up, I'm sure, a free consultation as well. Sure. So as always, his links and everything else will be down below in the description. Our last sponsor is, again, my own company, which I always like to plug as well, and that is simply Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business in major publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, AP News, Reuters, etc., and you could see those articles rank locally, sometimes in under 8 hours, for major competitive keywords that people were looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page 1 in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and often permanently. This is guaranteed SEO. It's basically search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking. Visit rankwith.news to learn more and book a time to speak with yours truly or one of our specialists about featuring your firm or your business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page 1 in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. That's rankwith.news, link as always in the description down below. All right, so Pat, we travel back in time. We see a young Pat. It's 1977, maybe 78, just past the bar, wearing bell bottoms still for some reason. I don't know why you're in those, but apparently you liked them back then. What advice do you give yourself? And of course, by extension, any other attorney out there that's, just getting started in their practice, what advice would you give to yourself as you're just getting started?
I'd say relax, and it's going to all work out. When you start out, you're just scared and you want to prove yourself. Going into courtroom is intimidating, and it takes a while to get experience. But I think I would just tell myself, you're smart, you work hard, it's going to work out. Don't worry about it.
That is good advice. That's good advice for just about anyone.
I tell myself that every day.
You can't solve your problems by worrying about them, so don't worry about them, right?
Right.
What was that? It was a phrase, trying to solve your problems by worrying about them is about as effective as trying to solve a math equation by chewing bubble gum. It just doesn't work. So
I like the line where they say, don't tell me not to worry, because everything I worry about never happens.
There's wisdom there, I guess. I always call it the benefit of being a pessimist, right? So if you're pessimistic about everything, either everything turns out terrible, but at least you were right and you knew this was going to happen and you were prepared for it, or you were wrong, but everything is way better than you were expecting. So there's a virtue
there. You go.
All right. So question number 2, I'm going to give you my magic pen, Pat. And again, with this pen, you can strike a law from the books, you can edit a law that's on the books, or you can add a new law. What law are you going to change and why?
I think the thing that would help most of my clients is most of the policies on auto insurance out there, the liability coverage is only $25,000. We've gone in front of the legislature the last 5 years and tried to get them to raise limits to 50,000. They say that if they do that, there's a lot of people that wouldn't be able to afford insurance. But what most people don't know is if you have liability coverage of 50,000 to cover someone else's injuries if you hurt them, it also covers your injuries if someone hurts you and they don't have coverage or they have insufficient coverage. So I think I would change the law that instead of 25,000 minimum limits, there'd be 50,000.
Makes sense. Is there, I don't remember, but is there a cap in Kansas on medical malpractice? I know in some states it's capped really low, and in some states it's much higher. And since we're talking about caps, I honestly wasn't sure about that.
Yeah, the cap that we had that was struck down by the Supreme Court was a cap on personal injury. So if you have not a wrongful death case, but an injury case, it was capped at 250,000. They were raising that up 10,000 or so a year for a few years. And the courts decided that that wasn't fair. If someone has, $1 million in non-economic loss, which could be like they completely burned and scarred and deformed and can't function, the pain that they're going through and their functional loss is all called non-economic damage. That was capped at 250, and the courts did strike that down. So now we can go in and have the juries assess what they think is fair, and that verdict stands. It's not later taken away by the judge because of some law that they don't even know about. It's kind of odd, but you go in the courtroom and we have rules that we're required to follow. Like we can't mention insurance in the courtroom. The very first question the jury comes back with is, was there insurance involved? Well, the courts don't want us to say, there's a $50,000 policy and then have the jury say, well, here's 50,000. They want to have them value the claim based on damage, which makes sense. But the way it's presented to the jury, they get half the information. They're always wondering who's going to be hurt by this and who's going to pay. And it'd be nice if we had a better system for that.
Huh. Well, that's good to know. If somebody, so I was trying to wrap things up here, but now I'm going down a rabbit hole. So with the changing of that law, if somebody had a case that, went to court and they lost or settled, or they had a very minimal amount that they could claim, and then the law passed, are they able to retroactively go back and get more? Or are they just kind of out of luck because, when they pursued their case, that was the law of the land?
So I'm not quite sure how to answer that. Once you settle the case, you're always required to sign a release that basically says if your condition gets worse, you can't come back for more. It's unusual to have any kind of settlement where your future medical is left open. Mm-hmm. So when we settle a case, and let's say we get policy limits from a trucking company that's like $1 million, we have to contact Medicare, and sometimes we have to contact certain health insurance companies if they're like a federal ERISA plan and reimburse them. And so we try to get the settlement and then tell the client what they're going to get out of it after fees and expenses and after paying back these liens. And then when they know what their net amount is, then they settle, and they settle with the understanding that that's all they get. They can't come back for more. And the only exception is like in workers' compensation, you can settle a claim and keep your medical open, but that's the only arena that I'm aware of that happens. Maybe Social Security disability.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that answers a question that I didn't realize I had until you made that comment, and I had it. So, well, Pat, I want to thank you very much for taking time to talk with you and my listeners today. I always like to give my guests the last words. Do you have any parting words of wisdom or any thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Well, come visit Salina. It's a really nice town.
There we go. You know what? They call us the land of Oz for a reason. That's AHS. That was the 80s slogan. I grew up on that one, right? The Oz. Right. Kansas. So absolutely.
You got to slow down to enjoy it out here, but it's a great place to live.
We've got a lot of sky and very, very nice people in general. I love it out here. My wife's from Pennsylvania. Things are a little more hustle and bustle as you get closer to the coast. But
yeah, I get claustrophobic. I'm around trees. I've got kids and grandkids in Kansas City, and we go there, and we have a place that we stay at once in a while. And after 3 days, I need to get back here on the prairie and open skies.
Fair enough. Well, thank you again for meeting with us today. This has been The Attorney Post, and I've been chatting with Pat Neustrom of the law firm that bears his name. Neustrom.com is the website, link in the description down below. As always, this podcast does not constitute legal advice, and if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Obviously, if you live in the Midwest here in Kansas, if you live anywhere around Salina, and you've been injured, I highly recommend working with Pat and his law firm, Neustrom.com, link in the description down below. Give him a call. Consultations are always free, and I think I can confidently say he would be a great resource. This has been The Attorney Post. If you're watching this on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you are listening to this on any of the podcast channels out there, whether it's Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon, etc., if you rate us, comment, like, star, whatever option they give you, that's always appreciated as well. And again, until next time, this is Justin reminding you, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.